Heyo, heyo, heyo. What's up, guys? Koilie here. I am. Well, let's see. It is Tuesday, September 10th, 7:28 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or whatever. And I have been up since 5 a.m. Okay, which isn't a big deal because I slept for quite a while, trying to prepare myself to be gaming all day for the release of patch 5.4 Siege of Orgrimmar. Now, I'm a little wound down now in terms of excitement because I've been sitting here nerding over it for, well, the past couple hours since I loaded my WoW launcher and updated my files for the 5.4 patch. So I'm ready for this, but basically this is the most excited I've been for a WoW patch in a while, not just because of the scope of this raid and the awesomeness of the encounters I've tested, but just from the lore aspect of it as well. Like, I haven't really been a big lore freak throughout my gaming, on and off, but this is just, my god, like, looking at it all, you know, the horde in, you know, shambles, fucking Garrosh trying to forge his own war horde, and, you know, Vol'jin assembling, you know, the remaining armies of the horde to take on Orgrimmar, just to attack Orgrimmar. And I was talking about this on my stream the other day. I was flying all around Orgrimmar, you know, on the outside, inside, just going over the tactical, you know, advantages, the tactical placement of Orgrimmar. Things most people probably never even really look at. They're like, oh, this is my capital city, or this is the Horde's capital city, you know, whatever. You know, we go in and we charge in when we're raiding it. But I mean, if you really look at it from the aspect of, this is a fortified city. Like, you look at, okay, the front entrance. It's on a peninsula, and the only access to it without going through massive horde controlled areas is via the sea, which is where you come in when you initially assault Orgrimmar. But you can't really come up from the south because you have to go through the troll controlled territories and outposts and march up through this narrow canyon. Your army would be decimated. You can't come in from the west because you have to cross the barrens and you have to cross narrow waterways, all the while more horde fortified outposts. And even if you tried to sneak in through Ashen Vale and come down around the mountains and come in through Orgrimmar's west entrance, you're not getting an army through that pass. You're talking about a pass that you could file, you know, a few ranks side by side, and you're funneling them across a narrow bridge, and then again through canyons where your army would be decimated. So what else is there? The south entrance, or the north entrance into Ashara. Okay, you could come in from Ashen Vale, but again, you're going past horde-controlled outposts across a narrow bridge. And then you still got to fight your way through more horde-controlled areas in Ashara. And then say you get to that rear gate, you're fighting through a canyon with no tactical targets the whole way. There's nothing there until you get down to this Valley of Honor. There's nothing except a kill zone where your army is again decimated. But again, let's forget that and go back to, again, a northern gate approach. Okay, so you can't come from Ashen Vale. What if you come from the sea and try to enter through the harbor in Ashara? Well, therein lies another problem. The mouth of this harbor is this crescent comes to a very narrow pass, and there's that little goblin base there with a massive cannon aimed at that little pass. On top of that, there's smaller cannons in this fortification, and if you look in the water of this harbor, it's loaded with floating anti-ship mines. So you're not getting your army, navy through there without getting decimated either. So really, despite what it looks like, the most accessible entrance is the front gates of Orgrimmar. So you come in from the sea, you dock on, you know, Orgrimmar's very own docks, and you have these defensive towers, and this is where you fight Gallicrass, which is a pretty cool fight because you actually turn Orgrimmar's defensive towers on the boss throughout, you know, the fight. But yeah, you take the beach. We come in, we storm the beach, we take out the cannons, and then we have to fight this boss to assume control of the beach. Basically, it's awesome. And like, you really, even now with the siege of Orgrimmar at hand, like I don't think a lot of people really have stopped to look at this, how well built this is. You know, these designers that design these places, you know, they're tactically sound. I don't really, I have to really think back to think of the old version of Orgrimmar. I mean, it was pretty similar, but they had a lot of defenses in the Cataclysm that weren't there previously. So, yes, Orgrimmar is extremely sound tactically. And then, you know, of course, it's nestled in these canyons, so, you know, you can't really assault it except for the main entrances, and aerial assaults, you know, you're going to get shot down too, you know. Or the Horde has great aerial defenses. We've got our airships, our, you know, our Zeppelins, and our Wyvern Riders, so yeah, it's pretty neat. So there I have gone on with my assessment of the Orgrimmar defenses from a tactical standpoint. So you can get a little, man, I never thought of that moment. And now next time you go around Orgrimmar, you'll be looking around, assessing its defenses and capabilities. It's going to be pretty neat. So yeah, I'm totally nerded the fuck out about this. This is awesome. And we're fighting Garrosh, motherfucking Hellscream, you know, this total badass. The guy's a badass. He's a douche, but he's a badass, okay? So, let me move on here. Give a little overview here of some of the patch notes that I am perhaps most excited about. That would be the Shadow Priests, or Priest in general. So, let's just go through here and we look at the Priest, okay? Start off with the first thing here, Ham of Hope. Now prefers to target healers when it grants mana. Healers will always be picked before non-healers, regardless of how much mana they have. If you ever played a healer, and you sit there and you have to watch like everyone else's mana bars, because you don't want to mana him, especially back in like Firelands and stuff, when all like the mages are playing Arcane and they dump their mana pools, and then you're like, oh, I'm out of mana, but I can't hit him because it's going to go to these fucking mages. So that won't be an issue anymore. But that's just a little thing. Leap of Faith no longer requires you to be facing the target, or so you can pull people with your back to them. That's nice. That means you have to, it makes Leap of Faith a little less, you know, easier to use, basically, let's say. I mean, it can cost you a great grip if you have to, you know, even if your turn is almost instantaneous, you only have to even get, you could pull them from the side. You just can't pull them from behind you. Anything in like a half of a pie in front of you, you can do a pull, but now you can do it in 360. So that's great. Shadow Word Death now deals 15% more damage. 15% more damage is 15% more damage. What does this really mean, though? It means that Shadow Word Death's DPET, damage per execute time, will rise above that of Mind Blast, which just goddamn makes sense. Like, this is your execute. It's instant cast. It should do more damage than its counterpart Mind Blast. Mind Blast is a cast time, deals damage directly, and gives you a Shadow Orb. Shadow Word Death is instant, deals damage directly, and gives you a Shadow Orb. But you can only use it as an execute, in an execute level of, you know, the enemy target's health bar is in execute range. It should be more powerful. Why should you have to wait until the end of the fight? You know, all it was before was let me generate a little bit more orbs. It was still an execute mechanic in the sense that it let you insanity more or DP more, both. But it was if you really wanted to min-max it, it was gamey. You had to game it, you know. You didn't even necessarily want to double tap it. Shadow Word Pain now deals 25% more damage. That's a nice little chunk of damage increased, okay? 25% more. It's instant. It deals direct damage upon application. Great buff. Also, it's buffed by, you know, people look at this and go, oh, 25% Shadow Pain. Okay, whatever. But our mastery also is focused around our dots, so 25% increased damage here. That's going to amplify into our mastery and amplify further into our 2-piece for the tier, which increases the critical strike of our mastery procs. Or, sorry, the critical strike damage bonus of our mastery procs. So it's a little deeper, you know, value than an initial glance. You know, it's a little bit more than just 25%. Same with the Vampiric Touch. Vampiric Touch increased by 20%. Spear Shell duration has been reduced to 10 seconds, and the damage absorb shield can be reduced through battle fatigue. So that's a nerf. No, yes, no, maybe it's a nerf. Your Spirit Shells on the target still last 15 seconds, but the amount of time you have to cast shells has been reduced to 10 seconds. So, yeah. Holy Word Sanctuary mana cost reduced to 3.8%, down from 6.3%. Now functions like a smart heal, healing the 6 most injured targets within range. And minor guardians are no longer targeted, blah, blah, blah. So that's a nice little buff. Light Spring is now baseline for Holy Priest. So Light Well, the original, is gone as the baseline. It's now Light Spring, but you can glyph it to make it the old Light Well that you have to click on. And if you do, people that click on it will receive 50% increased healing. So it's a big buff to the healing of Light Well for people using it. So now there's a huge incentive to actually click it. Otherwise, it's just a smart heal. Let's see. Serendipity's mana cost has been increased to 20% per stack from 10%. So that's a nice buff. So basically, when you do like flash heals, binding heals as a Holy Priest, you get a Serendipity stacks, which stacks 2 times. And it decreases the mana cost of your next like Greater Heal or Prayer of Healing, etc. And decreases its cast time. So that's a nice little buff there for Holy as well. And it no longer displays a Power Aura effect, but you can track it on your own. It still has a buff. They use that Power Aura now for Divine Insight for Holy and Dis. Alright, now let's get on to Shadow. Obviously, I read some of the Shadow things in here that were general pre-spells, like Pain and Death. But Shadow-specific ones, okay, this is a nerf-ish, but it's a nerf. Shadow Form increases the priest's armor by 60% now, but it no longer reduces all damage innately by 15%. And unless you have like a boatload of armor, your physical damage reduction gain from this is still going to be less than the 15% you had before. So we're a little less resilient than we're used to, but it's not that noticeable in PvE. And PvP, well, do more damage and kill shit before they kill you, I guess. But yeah, with Inner Fire Glyph, you know, you're looking at 90% armor increase. So, you know, you're pretty strong there, I guess, against the physical aspects. Alright. Shadowy apparitions now create a shadowy version of the priest that floats toward the target and deals damage. Apparitions are now treated as a missile and no longer an attackable creature. You'll notice if you use, for instance, sorry, my nose itches because my dog fur is on it. If you use like mixed battle text or something and it shows like the breakdowns of your damage as it's going by scrolling, you'll see like shadowy apparitions in the past have always been a pet damage. Now you'll notice they're just shadow damage. Like your other damages, they're actually a missile. What it means that they're a missile is they fly straight towards the target. It doesn't matter what's in their path. It doesn't matter. They can't be killed in PvP. They can't be targeted. They go in, they deal damage. It's just an aspect of your rotation, and it can't be negated or bugged out. Like if you recall, on Elegon, I used to talk about it all the time when I would be getting the world #1 DPS parses on Elegon for weeks in a row. No one could beat me, not even other classes. And I'd be like, can you imagine if my shadowy apparitions worked on this fight? Like, I'd be the top on that fight with my shadowy apparitions completely bugged out. Like, not a huge percent, but a nice little chunk of my damage completely non-functional. So now we shouldn't encounter situations like that anymore with shadowy apparitions. So yeah, and then of course the vampiric touch 20% increase. Again, that's 20%, but it's not really. It's more because, you know, mastery, 2-piece, etc. This is one I really am excited about. Angelic Feather now increases allies' movement by 80%, up from 60%. Now, I've been using these feathers a lot since I was PvPing. I started using them in PvP as a healer. Before, I was always using Phantasm when I was Shadow. But when I started healing, I started trying the feathers out. And I'm like, well, these feathers are really good because, for instance, you drop a feather down and then you Spectral Geist, and you run over the feather and you run over so you can get your CC chain started on a target or whatever. Because basically, as a priest, you know, it's pretty easy to see when this priest is barreling towards you, like, okay, this clown's about to try to psychic scream me. But they just run away and then it becomes a clown show. But if you're invisible and you're moving fast, or just moving fast in general with the feather, you know, you can get in, pow, get that psychic scream off. It's fucking great. But 80%. Now this makes it extremely fast. Like 60% is what body and soul is, but you know, you can only body and soul when you don't have weakened soul. These feathers you can chain. You can run around for a good 20, 30, I don't remember how long, but just chaining them. It takes like 6 feathers before you hit a wall where you don't have a feather to carry you on for a couple seconds. And if you got like rocket boots or dark flight or both, you could pretty much run non-stop at a highly increased speed for like a minute straight, were you so inclined. And yeah, they're just really fun. They're really fun. So skip Cascade's effect can now bounce up to 4 times, up from 3. Its effect should no longer bounce between minor guardians. Okay, so that's a nice buff to Cascade. For healing, it doesn't really necessarily say it doesn't bounce 4 times for Shadow too. So I guess a DPS buff too if there's enough targets for it to hit. Which some fights there's that many fucking targets. Divine Insight for Priest now has a 100% chance to activate its effect when using penance. Now this is really fun. I was doing some disc 3s on the PTR and dueling and such, but what it means is every time you penance, you're guaranteed a Divine Insight proc if you're spec'd into it as disc. What this lets you do is put up a shield that either ignores weakened soul or doesn't cause weakened soul, which means you can put up 2 shields and they stack. They stack. So you can double shield and just like put up these massive shields. It's so fun. And when you're dueling, you could take a Glyph of Spell Reflect, which is now buffed to 70%, and just sit there penancing and casting Solace off the enemy, Mindbendering on them, whatever. And well, I use Solace on dueling because it helps heal me, do the damage, give me the mana, and I stay mobile, boom, 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 and just watch them kill themselves while you fucking blast huge shields up on yourself. It's pretty awesome. From Darkness Comes Light has been increased 20% chance to activate up from 15. So that's a little buff. You know, in most cases, you know, where you're using it with only a few targets, it's going to be nice. It becomes an annoyance with too many targets because you just have more procs than you could use. But that's sometimes the case, even at 15%, the current version of it. So this just makes it even more so like, oh god, there's so many procs, what do I do? Whatever. I don't like wasting talent, so you know, when you overcap too much on a proc, it makes that talent feel less useful, because it is. But I mean, if there's nothing better, a lot of times in a situation where there's just way too many targets and I'm just overcapping on the procs and they feel like something could be done better, I mean, it's it depends. It depends. In situations, say it doesn't really matter, I need lots of movement, and if I overcap procs, who cares, as long as I have them there to use, that's good. In a situation where there's lots of targets and I might be overcapping procs, but there's like a primary kill target in that pile, then in that situation I might use like Mindbender, because Mindbender also got buffed, does 10% more damage. So like for instance, I'll be dotting everything, boom, 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 and then throw like my bender out on the main kill target or one of the main kill targets. and use my DI procs on him and my Devouring Plagues while I continue to dot everything else around. You think, oh, I don't use Insanity for the primary kill target. Well, then you have to stop dotting everything else whenever you have 3 orbs, because if you DP and you don't channel Insanity on that guy, what's the point of having Insanity? Mindbender, you just boom, you toss him out there, 1 global, or if they don't fix the glyph of Shaw, the new minor glyph, which makes your Fiend look like the Shaw Fiend that the Grand Empress Mace used to do, it also gives the Grand Empress Mace effect of no GCD Shadow Fiend Mindbenders. So, I mean, you just get over to the main kill target, throw a GCD-less fucking bender on him while you refresh like pain or whatever, and move on. Dot, 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 dot. Come back to the main kill target, Mind Blast, DP, dot, 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 dot. Mind Sear a little. Stuff like that. See, this is where you implement shit like that. Takes a little thought. But this is what I do. This is what I do. Big Daddy of Shadow and all that. Alright. Halo's healing is no longer affected by diminishing returns when used on multiple targets. That's cool. Halo healing is pretty nice, even in PvE as Shadow. Sometimes, you know, you time Halos in Grand Emperor's progression, for instance. I healed on the actual kill, but I was Shadow for a lot of the attempts, and, you know, I time Halos with the explosion of the little dissonance fields and stuff, so, yeah. Alright, Twist of Fate has been buffed too. The threshold for it to activate has been up to 35% from 20. So it now activates upon healing or damaging a target below 35% or at 35% instead of 20. So it activates 15% sooner. This is pretty huge. It still increases damage by 15%, but you now, if you're using this, you can now start the initial phase of your execute at 35%. And then, of course, at 20%, you start to rotate in the deaths and the increased Devouring Plagues and stuff. But, yeah. And then in ad fights with lots of ads you're killing, I mean, I was getting up times of 80% of Twist of Fate and shit. It's nasty. It's going to be pretty good. You might see a lot of use of Twist of Fate. You might even see, I don't know yet. It's going to take some testing and throughout the encounters and stuff I'll see. But you might even see a lot of Twist of Fate usage, even in single target, for instance, because with the change to the RPPM procs, like not having guaranteed procs of trinkets and such at the beginning, might change that incentive to use Bloodlust and Heroism so often at the beginning of fights for opening burst, which opening burst is a pretty big deal. Like, it carries a lot of weight throughout some encounters, and you might see more going into using Lust and Heroism in execute phases. We'll see how this burst and trinket proccing stuff ends up playing out, but yeah, if you get to see a lot more Heroism during execute, you might see Twist of Fate on the rise, just as one factor. Also the fact that it's probably pretty good, you know. We'll see. I don't want to get too much into it now. There's a lot of playing, a lot of theory crafting, a lot of just experiencing to still be done. But this has gone on way longer than I wanted. This is like 26 minutes deep. A lot of people probably have stopped watching by now. But anyway, guys, I'm going to go continue preparing for 5.4. I'll probably be up all day and all night because I'm going to get my legendary cloak as soon as. Please let servers come up on time. You're supposed to be up at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I hope they are, because I want to get to fucking cracking. A couple hours in, I'll have my legendary cloak. Then I'll just sit there farming timeless coins and shooting the shiz, etc., etc. It's going to be awesome. So, see you guys there. Make sure to come out to the stream. Twitch.tv/Koilie. It's in the info below. So, 5.4, Siege of Orgrimmar. Garrosh, motherfucking Hellscream, going down. Shadow Priest DPS, going up. Deuces.